Well, good morning. I think we can just go ahead and cancel the rest of the service. The music was the message, and I would be quite okay with that. When we went backstage a few minutes ago, David said, "Hey guys, we've been here before. We've all done this, a bunch of times." And I was kind of like, "Time out. This is my first, potentially my last." So bear with me. Last Sunday, or Sunday before last, when we were leaving out of here, I think Dave and Zoltan were sitting in the back here. And as I was walking by to go out the side door, I heard David say, "Humans mess up everything." So I kind of stopped in my tracks. I thought that's what he said, so I turned back around. I said, "What did you just say?" And he said, "Humans mess up everything," which pretty much is what we believe about man, which is what we're going to discuss today, is what do we believe about man. And we really could end the service with humans mess up everything. But fortunately for us, we've been redeemed through Christ. We've had a second chance. So speaking of redemption, depending on how this goes today, I'm going to ask for a lot of forgiveness probably. When I was young, 8 or 10 years old, going to church in Blackville, I always wanted to be a state trooper. My buddy Matt from Blackville is here today, which now I got to really be on my P's and Q's. He's going to take all this back home and share it. I knew I wanted to be a state trooper. I don't know why. Nobody in my family was in law enforcement, but I always felt this little nudging that God was maybe calling me to be a preacher. But I was hoping that was not going to be the case. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, I was supposed to be in law enforcement because I think I had a way larger impact on somebody's life than being a preacher. And also, I thought being a state trooper was probably a lot safer than being a preacher. I'll apologize up front for my accent. If you need translation at the end of the service, just get with me and I'll have Tina translate. A couple of months ago, Peyton and I were getting ready to cut the grass, and I said, "Hey, go grab the oil." He looked at me. He was like, "What?" I said, "Go grab the oil. Matt knows what I'm talking about." And he's like, "What?" He goes, "The oil?" I said, "Yeah, the oil." And the instrument that David and Sarah play, I learned just recently, is a guitar. It's not a guitar. I've always called it a guitar. Before we jump into this week's message about what we believe in man, I want to really commend Wade. Where's Wade? Wade, on his message 2 weeks ago about what we believe in the Bible. And just real quick on that, Peyton and I were challenged a few years ago of if somebody asked us what we believed about the Bible, or why we believe the Bible, what our answer would be. See, the number one answer, mainly for Christians, is because it changed my life. And then the follow-up question for the person asking that question, who's usually not a believer or usually an atheist wanting to try to trip you up, is, well, how did it change your life? And most of the time, we don't have an answer for that. And I was challenged on that because if I got asked that question, that was going to be my go-to answer because it changed my life. But I wanted to have something a little more substantive than that. And the reason I believe the Bible was because it's a reliable collection of historical documents. It's written by eyewitnesses during the lifetime of other eyewitnesses that report supernatural events that took place to fulfill specific prophecies and claim that their writings are divine rather than human in origin. Now, I know everybody's going to turn around now and look for the teleprompter back there. But it challenged me to memorize that. I can't give credit to memorizing that. Matt knows I'm from Blackville. There's no way in heck that I ever come up with that on my own. I stole that from somebody that I don't even know who they were because I heard a preacher say it one time, and I thought that was pretty cool, so I thought I would memorize it myself. So I challenge you to know why you believe in the Bible. See, what we believe about man, we believe as Christians that we were created in the image of God. Now, I'm not 100% sure what that means, created in the image of God. When I was growing up, every time I heard about created in the image of God, I was always trying to picture what God looked like, personally, physically. I always pictured him as Hercules or Arnold Schwarzenegger, somebody with big muscles and maybe long hair. That's what I always pictured God to be. But see, the Bible does refer to the eyes of the Lord. They refers to the outstretched arms of the Lord. In Proverbs 15:3, it says, "The eyes of the Lord are in every place." And in Proverbs 5:21, it says, "For the Lord sees clearly what man does, examining every path." Jeremiah 16:17 says, "I am watching them closely, and I see every sin. They cannot hide from me." In Isaiah 59:16 says, talks about God's outstretched arms, his redemption, and his grace. See, in the book of John, it's referred to God the Father and the Spirit, who cannot be seen. In Exodus, God specifically taught, you cannot see my face. When God has shown himself to people, it has been in forms others can visually recognize. For example, the cloud over the Israelites. In Genesis, the angelic visitor to Abraham. But for most of us in the New Testament, it's God in Jesus Christ. He sent his son, Jesus Christ, which is God. That's what we know of God's physical image. In Genesis 1:26 and 27, it says, then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. Verse 27 says, so God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. See, why would God create man in his own image? See, it's his desire for us to love him and him to love us. You know, when I think of God now, I think of the fruits of the Spirit. Maybe I'll ask the crowd to jump in. Somebody name me a fruit of the Spirit. Kindness, love, gentleness, self-control, faithfulness, goodness, patience. That's when I think of God now, in the image of God, I think of all those things. See, we were created for his pleasure, for loving him and being loved. God wants us to share his glory in the beauty of his creation. Henceforth, he created us. And God blessed them by giving them dominion over everything. See, master means authority over. And I thought about this verse in my southern hunting roots. I was like, Adam really screwed it up for us. But see, now we have to go spend a bunch of money on corn, shotgun shells, rifle bullets, four-wheelers, deer stands. Got to have food, vinous sausages and sardines and potted meat. Got to have all that when you go hunting. Then you got to take it to the processor. And by the time you figure all that up at the end of the year, it comes out to be about $137 per pound for deer meat. So if we were created to be masters or authority over before sin, could you imagine being in the Garden of Eden and just calling up an 8-point, 10-point buck, trophy buck? Come on, bud. It's been nice you being here. It's been nice you being a pet to us, but unfortunately I need some meat. I need a trophy rack hanging on the wall. So when I get to heaven and see Adam, we're going to have a little chit chat about that. But we were made to be masters or authority over God's creation. Then came the fall and the depravity of man. See, in Genesis 2:16 and 17, it says, and the Lord commanded the man, saying, of every tree of garden you may freely eat. But of the tree of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. See, why would God put a tree in the middle of the Garden of Eden and tell him not to eat from it? That's like putting a gallon of ice cream in my freezer and telling me not to get up at 10, 11 o'clock at night and not go eat it. It's too much of a temptation. I like ice cream too much. It doesn't like me very well. See, if Tina doesn't buy ice cream and put it in the freezer, I might have a little craving for some ice cream, but I know it's not there, so I don't even get out of my chair and go get it, so the temptation has been taken away from me. But a lot of times it's there. And if I don't get to it before Peyton, it's usually going to be gone. So why would we do that? Why would he do that? See, it's a choice. God gave us a freedom to choose. Just like with the ice cream, I have a choice to eat it or not eat it. I have a choice to eat it and then have to go run a lot and work out a lot harder, or I can choose to not eat it and gain the reward. See, there's always rewards and there's always consequences. So why did he give us a choice? He wanted a meaningful, loving relationship with man, with us, with you and I. And for this to happen, man had to have that free choice. Free choice is not meaningful if there's nothing to choose. So when you imagine God putting that tree there and going, I want to see if you truly love me or not. or if you love this fruit more than you love me, choice is yours. Same way with decisions we make every day. We have a choice to make. Is it for our pleasure? Are we getting something to gain out of it? Is there a reward? Most of the time, there's consequences. As we have consequences today, when it comes to our spiritual life, we can choose to follow God. We can choose to not. But when that day comes, and it's coming, we have a big choice to make. And hopefully we made that choice before that day comes, because the choice then is taken away from you. There's no more choosing. But you made that choice prior to that day, and unfortunately, and I'll just be real with you, it's heaven or hell. And we have that choice. In Romans 5:12, it says, when Adam's sin entered the entire human race. Adam's sin brought death. So death spread to everyone, for everyone's sin. Yes, people sinned even before the law. See, Adam and Eve thought they would get good pleasure. How often do we think that? How often do we really truly think about decisions we make or choices we make? See, you could put Gil's name where Adam's name was. It probably wouldn't sound quite as good. Adam and Eve goes better probably than Gil and Eve. But if you had put Gil's name where Adam's name was, I know me, I probably would have made the same choice. Because you'd have told me I was going to be like God if I ate that fruit. If you told me I was going to see things that I wouldn't see if I didn't, I know me. I probably would have walked around the tree for about 2 or 3 days and tried to figure out a way to make it right and try to come up with an excuse why I thought I could eat it. So I know me. I know the decision I probably would have made. So when we talk about sin and how it entered the world after the fall of man, you can just take those 2 young babies in the back room right there, and you can give one of them a bottle. You put the other one right beside it. Within 30 seconds, the other one's trying to snatch it from them, trying to take it from them, because they want it. Even if the other baby is full, for some reason, they want the other person's bottle. We're the same way as adults. We want our friends' houses. We want our friends' cars. We want their jobs. We want their titles. Just the sinful nature of man to want something we can't have, but there's consequences. I read in the news this week, and I don't read the news a whole lot. I apologize up front for anybody that has friended me on Facebook in the last couple of weeks. I created one about 6 weeks ago for one purpose and one purpose only, to buy a truck. I'm going to cancel it. If you have friended me and I have not accepted your friendship, I am not, because I'm going to delete it. Okay. But I was reading the news, Dan, which I don't do a lot, about Will and Jada Smith. Everybody knows Will Smith, the Prince of Bel-Air, the show and all his movies. But the big headline this week was that they don't discipline their children at all. None. No discipline at all. Because they want them to suffer the consequences of the choices they make. Well, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Because I would like to come back here in about 5 years from now and let's see how that ended up for them. If there's no consequences, there's no change. I always told people in my job, if there's no change, if there's no consequences to the crime, there's no change in behavior. So why do we do this? Why do we keep making these decisions? Why do we keep living in sin? It's because we have a sinful nature. This quote here by theologian Wayne Grudem says, so what was the effect of sin when it comes to the image of God in man? Since man has sinned, he is certainly not as fully like God as he was before. His moral purity has been lost, and his sinful character certainly does not reflect God's holiness. His intellect is corrupted by falsehood and misunderstanding. His speech no longer continually glorifies God. His relationships are often governed by selfishness rather than love, and so forth. Though man is still in the image of God in every aspect of life, some parts of that image have been distorted or lost. The image of God is what makes man human. Man cannot lose the image without ceasing to be what he is. Moreover, it's only because man keeps his image of God is he redeemable and worth redeeming. Without God, we would have no reason to send his son to die on our behalf. I love that last line. It says, man is redeemable and worth redeeming. And that's why God sent his son Jesus, because he felt the same way. As much as we screw up, as much as we continue to screw up, we're redeemable. Even after we continue to sin and live sinful lives, God loved us enough to send his son to die for you and me. How often do we get hurt by somebody one time, we write them off immediately? But we expect to be forgiven time after time after time after time. But we write them off right away. I encourage you, if there's somebody you've written off and you maybe don't have a valid reason for doing it, to reach out to them, redeem them, give them one more chance. Psalms 51:5 says, For I was born a sinner, yes, from the moment my mother conceived me. And we spoke about that just a few minutes ago. 1 John 2:16 and 17 says, For the world offers only a craving of physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from this world. And this world is fading away along with everything that people crave, but anyone who does what pleases God will live forever. See, many times Jesus told the disciples, you are not from this world. If you were, the world would love you. How many of you lived one way when you found Christ? You completely turned at a 180 and started following Christ. You had a bunch of friends who just fell by the wayside. It says, because if you were from this world, the world would love you. So when you continue to move forward towards God's presence and towards God's glory, you'll see that happening. You'll see people that you've known your entire life will slowly start fading away out of your life. But that's what God's called us to do. He's called us to look different, to be different. So we're seeing that today. Does the world love Christians? Are people knocking down our doors to come love on us? We're seeing God being taken out of just about everything today. Where I currently work now at the federal courthouse, this week is when I realized when they bring somebody up to swear them in, raise your right hand, put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. 3 of the courtrooms now it says there is no Bible. You don't raise your hand. You say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth under the penalties of perjury. 3 of the federal courtrooms right now, no Bible in them, and that's what they're saying. So when we move God out, when we try to hide Him, when we act like we don't know Him, we slowly allow Him to fade away in the things we have been taught or believe. I know for me, if I miss church on one Sunday, it's easier to miss the next Sunday. And if it's easier to miss that Sunday, it's so much easier to miss the next Sunday. And 6 months goes by and I hadn't been to church. My relationship with God has slowly faded away. People in my surroundings slowly see my relationship fading away. And thankfully, I'm in a church that I have guys that will hold me accountable for that. I know 4 of them for a fact. Actually, I know a bunch more than that will hold me accountable for that. Where you been? What's been going on in your life? Why haven't you been to church? And I'm grateful for every one of y'all in here that holds me accountable for that, to get me back in a good relationship with God. So when we act like this on Sunday, and this Monday through Saturday, people don't see God in us. So I'll challenge you moving forward, especially in our current circumstances, let God see you every day. There's a quote about sin that says, it takes you where you don't want to go. It keeps you longer than you want to stay. It costs you more than you want to pay. It says Romans 3:23, for the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God is eternal life in Christ. So we often live our lives for today. Not tomorrow, not next week. And we do live it for the weekend. Where I work, as soon as Monday morning comes, all we talk about is Friday. Monday, we didn't even open the courthouse good yet. Hey, I can't wait for Friday to get here. Can't wait for Friday to get here. And then Friday gets there, and of course it does go by in a blink of an eye. Monday morning comes 8 o'clock, same discussion. We're all sitting around the table, I can't wait for Friday to get here. We don't think about the moment that we're in right then. We don't think about the life we can change right then. We don't think about just something we can share right then. We don't think about grabbing somebody's arm and saying, can I pray with you for a minute right then? Could you imagine if we lived every day of our life and our decisions we make are based on eternity? Not today, not where we're going fishing at tomorrow, but today, for eternity. How would that look? I think it would look a lot different if we lived our lives and based our decisions on eternity. See, if we based our decisions on eternity, we'd probably stop gossiping in the workplace. We wouldn't yell at someone before we thought about the repercussions of that. Before we did this or before we did that, we would think about the consequences behind our actions if we lived our lives for eternity. See, where I work, like I just told you earlier, is always Friday or the weekend. So this past week, it was Friday. I was out back, and so when you're assigned out back, you're kind of checking in, trucks coming in and all that, x-ray machines and all that good mess. And you also get to roam around the courthouse, so it's a little bit of freedom that day. So that day I chose to go outside Friday afternoon about 3 o'clock because the weather was nice and walk. And there's one portion of the block of the courthouse that the federal courthouse doesn't own. It's actually a church. It's a beautiful little stone church right on the corner that the church would not sell to the federal government for the courthouse to be built on. And as I came around the corner and turned, as soon as I turned, there was a guy, I don't know, about 100 feet in front of me. He had his back to me. And he was just standing there. There's a lot of homeless people in that area. So I didn't quite know, what was going on. And I was like, well, I don't want to just kind of sneak up on this guy or kind of walk up on him. He'd not hear me, especially because I got a bulletproof vest on, I got a gun and all that good stuff. And so I started dragging my feet when I got closer to him so he would hear me and I wouldn't startle him. And he turned around. And I said, hey, how are you doing today? And he said, man, I'm good. He said, I'm really good. He said, today's a good day. He said, man, I just got my ID. Pulls out his ID. He was so excited. He just got his ID. He said, but why is it so hard to get a Social Security card? I said, I know what you're going through. We have dealt with this with the Scooter Scott Project. I understand. But the Strom Thurmond building's right around the corner. He goes, I know, done made it an appointment. But it's so hard. He goes, I'm actually staying in Transitions right now, which is 1 block away from the courthouse. If you know anything about Transition, it can be a rough place. He said, somebody stole my wallet, so I'm kind of starting back over. He said, but God's good. He said, I'm moving up. My life's heading in a good direction. And I said, do you mind me asking your name? He said, my name's Jason. Jason is probably about my age. I think he was a little bit younger than me. Real young guy. And about my age. And I felt the Holy Spirit at that moment telling me, ask him, can you pray with him? Ask him, can you pray with him? Of course, the devil was on this side going, no, he's somebody else's problem. Don't worry about it. He's got too many problems. Just keep on walking and do your job. And I left a part out. I had lunch that day. We only get a 30-minute lunch, and I went into where we eat lunch, and in 10 minutes, you can ask Tina, I had wolfed all my food down in 10 minutes, so I had 20 minutes to spare, and I always usually sit there because there's somebody in there with me to talk to. And y'all know me. I like to talk, and I like to be around people. And there was nobody in there. First time since I've started in 8 months that there was no other person in the break room when I was there eating lunch. So I decided to get back up, go back outside to where I was assigned because there was somebody out there that I could talk to. And I thought, you know what? I got 20 minutes to spare. I'll just go walk around the block. And that's when this moment happened. So I told Jason, I said, do you mind if I pray with you? He said, man, I'd love it. And he reached up and grabbed me on my arm really hard and just was squeezing my forearm. So I prayed just real quickly for Jason. And when I said amen, he said, do you think I can come back and talk to you sometimes? He said, do you think I could come meet you somewhere and we could talk? He goes, I just need somebody to talk to. And he said, I'm working right over here in this house, and this house they're working on is directly behind the courthouse. And I said, Jason, I'm not assigned to this post but once a week, but if you see me out here, you can walk over and I'd love to talk with you as well. He said, well, I appreciate that. And he turned around and went to walk off, and when he stopped, he turned back around and he goes, people don't do what you just did. I am not patting myself on the back. I'm not bragging on me. I do love people. But when I made that decision, it wasn't for today. It was for eternity. It's going to get better. It's going to go uphill from here because we're redeemed through Christ. See, in 1 Peter 1:18, it says, for you know that God paid a ransom to save you from your empty life you inherited from your ancestors. And the ransom he paid was not mere gold or silver. See, redeem means gaining possession of something in exchange for something else. Y'all may have heard this week on the news as well. You think, for somebody who don't watch the news, read the news, you did like 3 news stories. This week, it was a South Carolina soldier who got awarded the Medal of Honor. He was born, I think, in Batesburg, Leesville, raised there for a while, and then moved to Elgin. But he just received the highest honor, I think, that the military awards, which is the Medal of Honor. And so many people get this award after they have died doing some heroic event. Thankfully, this young man, he didn't, but he went in, I'm assuming, Afghanistan or Iraq and saved 79 hostages. It was a bunch of hostages that he saved. And to those hostages, he was their redeemer. He redeemed them. I guess it was, time flies, I was going to say a few years ago, but it's probably been more like 20 years ago. I don't even know if we were married. It might have been Dave. I think we were married recently, and we went to Texas to see her family. And we went to her Uncle Tom's house, and I'd never met her family before, her aunts and uncles. They were all speaking Spanish. I didn't understand nothing they were saying, except uno, dos, a couple times I called on to that, but really didn't understand one word they were saying. So me and her Uncle Tom went outside, and his son and son-in-law, who both were police officers, so we kind of clicked right away, and I'd been there maybe 30 minutes, and he was cooking fajitas on the grill, and he was cutting off big pieces, and he was handing to everybody, and then Uncle Tom took a big bite, and he walked off really quickly. And I thought that was kind of odd. That's something strange about it. So I was still talking with his son and son-in-law, and I just felt something wasn't right. So I just kind of eased off, and I kind of looked around the corner, and he was on the ground. He was choking. So, of course, I asked him, "Are you choking?" Of course, he could not respond. And I ran over and got him off the ground. I did the Heimlich maneuver, never done it before, never been trained in it, but it worked. And he spit up the piece of fajita meat, and he lived. And he would tell you that I was his redeemer for that day. But I want to tell you, our redeemer is just not for today, or tomorrow, or next week. It's for eternity. If we truly believe he is the redeemer, it's forever. See, there's maybe times when you don't feel close to God, but generally it's us who walks away. God never leaves. God never walks away. It's us. See, when Christ redeems you, you want to have a relationship with him. In 1 Peter 2, 9 through 12, it says, "But you are not like that, for you are the chosen people. You are the kingdom priests, God's holy nation, his very own possession. This is so you can show others the goodness of God, for he called you out of the darkness into this wonderful light. Once you were not a people, now you're a people of God. Once you received none of God's mercy, now you have received his mercy." See, these privileges in this verse here were originally given to the Israelites by the nation. It was by the Israelites in Israel by God. See, God wants us to be his Israel. He wants us to allow us to have these privileges to be redeemed by him. In Isaiah 60:20, it says, For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the people. But the Lord shall rise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee. Psalms 107:2, Has the Lord redeemed you? Then speak out. Tell others he has saved you from your enemies. See, this is not so much a mandate to witness as a declaration that when we live in God's presence, we will not be able to keep this glorious experience to ourselves. And to me, that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I have with believers, including myself, when I'm pointing, there's three fingers pointing back at me. And when we're redeemed through Christ, we shouldn't be able to contain it. It should just be all over our face. It should be written all over us. We will not be able to keep this glorious experience to ourselves. But see, we leave out of here in about 20 minutes. We're all jacked up. We're on fire for God. We're going to tell everybody about his redemption, his grace, his mercy. And Monday morning comes. Kids are screaming and hollering about something. Something's broke down. Something didn't go right. We got the coronavirus. We got the nation in an uproar. And then our thunder's just stole away. But if we make our decisions and our thoughts on eternity, we can quickly revert back to God's glorious grace and our redemption. See, do people see us living this out every day? I'd encourage you this week to do something that you normally wouldn't do. Challenge yourself to do something to help somebody. So when I went back to that Jason story I just told you, that is something I don't have a problem talking with people. I can walk up to a mere stranger and start a conversation. It doesn't bother me a bit if it's about something I want to talk about. You want to talk hunting and fishing with me, I'm your guy. If you want to talk about Highway Patrol old stories, I'm your guy. You want to talk about the Lord? Maybe tomorrow. You know why? Because I wasn't prepared. You tell me we got a dove shoot tomorrow, I'm prepared. I got my shotgun shells, my gun, my license, my sardines, like I said earlier. I got everything prepared. I'm ready. You want to go sit down and have lunch and talk about the Lord? Got to take a rain check? Maybe next week? That's where I used to be. And sometimes still today. But I'm really working through that. So how are we redeemed and how do we do this? We do it by pursuing God. 1 Timothy 6:11 says, "But you, Timothy, belong to God, so you must run from evil things and follow what is right and good. Pursue a goodly life along with faith, love, perseverance, and gentleness." So when we talk about pursuing God or pursuits, that comes very natural to me. And probably William and Sean Mahundro, if he's in here. Because in our careers, we pursue people. We might not necessarily get in a high-speed pursuit every day, but multiple times throughout the day, if we see a drunk driver or we get a call about a drunk driver on so-and-so road and we see him go by us, if he's going this way at 70 and we're going this way at 70, we've got to turn around and we've got to pursue him. There are times when we do get in high-speed pursuits. See, with the Highway Patrol, when I was there, if we got in a high-speed pursuit, you couldn't be in an old vehicle or spare vehicle. Like if you took your car to the shop and you got this old jalopy, junk of car, you couldn't be in a high-speed pursuit. If you had just plugged your tire that morning to get to the shop to get a new tire on it and you still had a plug in it, you couldn't pursue. If you had a passenger in the car, you couldn't pursue. If it was raining or inclement weather, you couldn't pursue. If the risk outweighed the reward, you couldn't pursue. See, most of the time the reason we don't pursue because we have all these things in our life. We have TV, the news, Facebook, which I'm getting rid of, Twitter, deer hunting, baseball, football, Gamecocks, Clemson. All these distractions why we can't pursue. See, I think it was Tim McGraw that had the song that said, "Live like you were dying." I went skydiving, Rocky Mountain climbing, rode a bull named Fu Manchu, something like that. See, if we lived every day like we were dying, I bet our decision making would be much different. Well, I'm going to give you a news alert. We are dying. See, this morning when you woke up, you were one day closer to death than you were yesterday. For some of us, it might be, I hope, 80, 90 years for some of these little ones on the back row. For some of us, it might be 30, 40 years. For some of us, it might be next week. For some of us, it might be before we leave this building today. Because on May 16th, at 9:17 p.m., it was my dad's. I had just talked to him 3 hours earlier at 6:17, as I went back and looked at the time, and he was happy as he could be. The last thing he said to me, "Son, when you gonna move back down here?" Now I said, "I don't know, maybe one day." He said, "Well, I love you. Come see me soon." And 3.5 hours later, I get a phone call that he had died. But the hope I have in that is I know where he's at. Because I know how he changed his life. I knew the life he once lived. I knew the life he so desperately tried to live until the day he died. Even in his sermon, the pastor said, when he was trying to get my dad to come back to church, he knocked on the door. My dad was sitting at his table, a little bar area, drinking a glass of wine and reading the Bible. So when the pastor come in, he told the pastor, because you can't drink this wine. He goes, because the Bible says you can't drink. He said, but I can. That was always his excuse. And I'd watched my dad struggle with that for years and how God had redeemed him through that situation as well. But my hope is, and I know where he's at, and I know I'll get to see him again. See, in our pursuit with God, we always think God's running. See, when I'm pursuing somebody, they're running. And why am I pursuing him? Because I want to know who they are. I want to know what they have. I want to know what they're doing. I want to know what's in their car. How often are we pursuing God like that? We want to know who he is. We want to know what he does. We just want to reach out and grab the bottom of his garment. Faith like that. I didn't think he was going to be here today. And a good friend of mine that I grew up with, I guess we were 4 or 5 years old. Our farms were right beside each other. We've reconnected in the last several years. And he made a really profound statement a couple of months ago. He don't even know what I'm going to say. I'm not going to embarrass him. But his grandfather, Mr. Harold Steele, who Matt called Papa, and I think I called Papa because I didn't have a grandfather. I didn't know either one of mine. Matt told me a couple of months ago. Matter of fact, when we got in this discussion, it was such an awesome discussion. I put my phone on speaker so Tina could hear what he was saying. And he said, my Papa would get on his knees every night before he went to bed. He'd pray on his knees. Not just pray, but physically on his knees. And he said, that's what I want to start doing. But boy, did he hit me between the eyes. Because I had made Tina, I guess, and I, a prayer bench for a house 3 or 4 years ago, I guess, maybe longer than that. And I made it out of just rustic old wood that I had left over. And for me, I thought it was awesome looking. For Michael Johnson sitting here, this professional carpenter, he'd probably look at and say, well, you probably need to throw that in the trash and start back over. But for me, it was the best I could do because God didn't give me a whole lot in the carpentry area. But I made this really long bench, has a shelf on the bottom. I actually took a tree limb and did something on the back, carved a Bible verse in it. But the most profound thing I did, that I kind of look back now, I wish I wouldn't have done, is right where your elbows go. So when you get on your knees and right where your elbows go, I think a 2x6 or 2x8. Of course, it's real sharp right there. But right where your elbows go, I took something and kind of carved out little divots. And then I took a sander and I sanded it real smooth so your elbows could lay right there and they'd be comfortable. But I didn't really do it so much for the comfort as I wanted somebody to see that I had been praying at that bench and I had wore that spot out. I even took a darker stain and stained that area so it looked like it was dirty. Y'all women know what I'm talking about. When you paint your cabinets really nice color and then you go take some sandpaper and you sand them all down and give them that worn look. Because that was what was popular. That's what I did with this bench. I give it the worn look. Now, it is way more comfortable when you're trying to pray on it. But I thought, man, Tina and I are going to use this thing so much. And we didn't. Matter of fact, it started getting pictures on it and my plaques and some badges that I had when I retired from the Highway Patrol. And just this week, I went and cleaned some of that mess off. And I thought, we have got to get back to not just praying together, but praying on our knees together. But I hope that we will use that bench enough that we will physically wear those spots down deeper and deeper and deeper. That when we pass it to our kids and grandkids and hopefully great-grandkids one day, they can see that their parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents were prayer warriors. That we would physically get on our knees and pray. I think this is the next to the last slide. It says, big, beautiful doors hang on small hinges. And that's a big, beautiful door. See, when we go to somebody's house or we go somewhere on vacation and we see a door that looks like this, it's the main attraction for the house. That's all we see. We see the wood designs, the carvings in the door. We see the glass, the stain. We just see all the craftsmanship that's been put in this door. But when you open it up, there's these little small metal hinges. If nobody knows, that's what holds that door. Little metal small hinges, usually one at the top, one in the middle, one in the bottom. that nobody ever sees. See, if you think if the Christian life is to get all the glory, to be recognized, to get pats on the back, you're in it for the wrong reasons. See, we think we have to do amazing things to get God's attention, so we show others, so they'll look at us. See, when you open that door, those hinges every time, open those doors open and they close them. Nobody ever notices them. Nobody ever gives them the pat on the back and opens those doors and go, wow, those are the most beautiful hinges I've ever seen in my life. No, they got dirt all over them. They got dust all over them. They got grease all over them. If you like me, you done stripped out most of the screws going into it because you had the wrong size screwdriver putting them in. Nobody pays attention to those. So if you're in this business of Christian business, to get pats on the back, to be recognized, to be seen, we're in it for the wrong reasons. See, when you do God's work, you're going to get dirty, you're going to get greasy, you're going to get grimy. A lot of times when you get up in the morning, you're like, I don't want to do this all over again, but I'm going to live making my decisions based off of eternity. See, that's not it at all. So you have to be like a Jeff Jones that gets up every day with his mission of how can I change a young person's life. It's not giving them money. It's going and picking them up at 2 o'clock in the morning when they're in a bad situation because they're in a house that nobody cares about them and they need to get out. And generally Jeff calls me at 2 o'clock in the morning and goes, hey, I'm in a really bad situation. I'm going to pick up somebody. Call me in 10 minutes. And if I don't answer, call 911. Thankfully, me and Jeff worked out the code word that me and Scooter never could work out. There was this code word I knew to call the law. And Jeff and I just real, hey, if you call me in 10 minutes and I don't answer, call the law. See, it's like the Autries who take somebody in their house that they'd only met a few weeks because they trusted somebody's judgment. They trusted my judgment, Jeff's judgment, Tina's judgment on somebody that needed a chance. It's like the Mahundros, Deshaun sitting right there on the back row, who needed somebody to come alongside of him and just love him in a time of need. But there's many more stories like that. Most of you in here, I could tell a story about. I can tell you about the story of the Johnsons coming to the camp every weekend and giving up their time and working with us to help young men. And the list goes on and on. Talk about Pablo and Jennifer. Just heard his story this week, didn't know much about it until a couple weeks ago when we were riding down on the elders retreat. Of the people they've taken in, not only taken in, clothed, fed, college, the whole 9 yards, not related to them at all. I always thought they were related. Many more stories like that in this room, and that's why I'm so thankful to be a part of City Church. Because I know we put our feet to the fire. See, in most churches, it's 10% of the people that do 90% of the work. Ask me how I know that. I've been there. I'm going to challenge City Church not to be like the rest of the churches. And I'm not saying all churches, but a lot of churches. 10% of the people do 90% of the work. Because some of y'all probably saying, that's at my job, right? There's a lot of my jobs we're in, careers we're in. So what now? What does this mean? This means you're redeemed through Christ. And how do I live this out? It's by pursuing God. I'm going to ask David to come on up and start playing in the background. The song they're going to play is one of my favorite songs, the lyrics. It's called So Will I. And some of the words in the song says, if the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For everything exists to lift you high. If the wind goes where you send it, so will I. If the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. if the sum of all our praises still falls shy, then we will sing again 100 billion times. So this morning I'm going to ask you, so will you? That's not so will you, exclamation point. That's so with you, question mark. Zoltan, so will you? Jeff? Brian? Elders? Peyton? City Church? I'm going to probably make you do something you're going to feel a little uncomfortable about. It's not really uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, if we're believers in Christ, who we say we are, it shouldn't be uncomfortable at all. I didn't know he was going to be here this morning, so you can put the blame on Matt. Matt, you might want to hit the side door when we leave. But I'm going to ask you, before we sing, if you're physically able to do so. No hip surgeries, no back surgeries, nothing like that. In just a minute, to slide out of your chair and you get on your knees. You can turn around and use your chair as a prayer bench because it should be nice and smooth, or you can just stay facing forward. So this time I'm going to ask you to slide out of your chair. I want you to pray for whatever's on your heart, what God has convicted you of. Specifically pray for our country right now. Even our president. But whatever's on your heart, I want you to pray for, and then I'll close this out, and Dave and Sarah will come up and sing.